Let's sing. Give thanks. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Brother Terry. I appreciate that so much. Thank you, Sister Susan. And that song, every time I sing it or hear it, I think of Fumio Nomura, who is a little Japanese missionary that we love and adore, and in Iwo Jima. And that was, I can remember in my mind every time I see him singing that at our church. And that's just a powerful image in my mind and endures him to me and both of our hearts to the Lord. In reading those mission reports, I have found all the way, and Brother George Hammett there in South Africa, no matter where they are, all over, they are in, Brother Nina there in Kietro, they're all in the same kind of situation we are with this virus and are doing the best they can. And so we know how to pray for each other, and it's great to get that word from missionaries, and I'm so encouraged by that. Well, this month we're floodlights, right? And not night lights that discreetly shine a little light. There's a place and time for that. But then there's the big floodlight, open heart, open hands, when it comes to sharing the love of Christ and the light. And so you're to gush. You're to be a floodlight. And especially in relationship to giving. And giving is not just money. It's yourself. It's everything. And that you are is the Lord's. So in spirit of that, I want to bring a lesson from Ecclesiastes. We're in chapter 11, verses 1 through 8. And we've entitled this, The Secret of Living is Giving. The secret of living is giving. So, let's do that. Ecclesiastes, give you a little time to get there. If you have to cheat and look at it's right after Proverbs. And it's a great book. I've taught through this book several times. And the under the sun perspective, versus in vanity versus the knowledge of God. So we're going to look at these 8 verses in Ecclesiastes 11. Winston Churchill said, and I'll quote, "We make a living by what we get. We make a life by what we give." Okay? Make a living by what we get. We make a life by what we live. And so Solomon, well, who was he? He was the wealthiest man. We talked about how wise he was. But he was wealthy. One of the wealthiest men, if not the wealthiest, ever walked this earth. But he learned this. He learned that true lasting joy and fulfillment come through giving, not getting. Okay? And in this passage, Solomon teaches that the secret of living is giving. Jesus said it this way, it's better to give than to receive. And certainly Jesus could speak from experience, because who gave more than him? He gave the most. Jesus gave his life for the world. Now, if we are to experience happiness and joy in this life, then we must be a giving people. If we're going to be like our blessed Savior, Jesus Christ, we must be a giving people. If we are to receive rewards and honor in this life and in the life to come, we must be a giving people. There is a connection between this life and the life to come. And we must always remember that. Calvin Coolidge says, no person was ever honored in what he received. Honor has been the reward for what he gives. And so in the previous chapter, we're not studying there, but Solomon in the previous chapter instructed us how to behave ourselves and to treat those who are in positions of authority over us. And so now, at the top end of chapter 12, Solomon instructs us how to behave ourselves and treat those who are in position, who are walking beside us, okay, and perhaps serving in positions under us. That's a big deal to God. both ways. So Solomon, in the following verses, gives us really some practical advice on the kind of giving that will transform our lives. And so we've just called this Solomon's advice on giving. Notice what he has to teach us. Here's the first thing. Our giving should be selfless. Verse 1a. Cast thy bread upon the water. And so one of the characteristics of our unregenerate world is self-centeredness. And so everyone looks out for number one. People naturally hoard all they can for themselves, with whether it's toilet paper or what, with its little concern for others. Okay, so now they're saying meat, oh, watch out, it's going to be gone. And they're already saying, no, only a couple of items apiece, right? Why? That is our nature, all right? So giving to others, and specifically giving our money to the Lord, is one of the ways we die to self. So the more you give, you have to forget about yourself. And that phrase, cast thy bread upon the water, it was an ancient idiom or an expression that referred to generous giving, no thought of expectation in return. And that phrase suggests a certain abandonment of self and selfish interest. And so Solomon is urging his people to give up their self-centered ways and to learn the blessings that come through generosity. So to cast, that word means to throw indiscriminately. Okay? The term waters speaks of the multitudes of humanity. So bread, of course, is the sustenance of life. Jesus says, I'm the bread of life, right? So there's a kind of giving that is specifically designed to benefit the giver, okay? And so this type of giving is calculated, monitored, and comes with expectations to benefit the giver. In contrast, the type of giving described by this ancient saying clearly refers to generous giving without any knowledge of who is receiving it or how it is used, and is given in such a way that it provides it no opportunity to receive thanks, praise, or benefit. We see a lot of this kind of giving even now. We before the camera, and we represent this corporation or this corporation, and we're doing this for for whoever, and that's pretty good advertisement as well. God knows all the motives of that. But this type of giving here is selfless giving. It's just cast out indiscriminately. And it doesn't matter who's looking or who's not, or even who's receiving. I mean, we can see the same idea of giving, in the parable of the sower. Jesus says in Matthew 13:3, the sower went forth to sow. So what kind of sower is that? It's broadcasting, right? Broadcasting. It's not, digging it, putting a little hoe and putting the seed and covering it up and going to the next. That's not the kind of sowing. It's broadcasting seed, casting it out indiscriminately. And this is the reason the seed, if you read the parable, fell on 4 different types of soil, right? It's a picture of the heart. And so it just went everywhere. And so Solomon is urging to give in this cast your bread upon the water. This giving is personal. Notice he says cast your bread. He didn't say, cast their bread, but cast your bread upon the waters. Some are quick to instruct others to give. Some are willing to give generously and dispense someone else's resources, like the government. Okay? Somebody else's money. Giving is not truly given until it's personal. You've got to have a skin in the game, so to speak. You've got to have something to lose. You have something to forfeit. It's got to be personal. Until we hand out or cast out our bread, it will not be personal. Our bread. That Roman statesman, Seneca, said, I I possess nothing so completely as that which I have given away. Whatever I have imparted, I still possess. Those riches that remain with me, through all the victuals of life, those are the things that I give away. Okay? So that's just counterintuitive, isn't it? Right? It's counterintuitive. We think, oh no, if I'm going to hang on to, keep this, then I've got to hang on to it. But Jesus says, is giving bottles of water away, that one day it'll come back to you. Cast your bread upon the water, your bread. Notice verse 1 concludes, and thou shalt find it after many days. So there's the investment. Solomon's promise is that when we give in this anonymous, selfless manner, indiscriminately cast with absolutely no expectation of reward, a reward will always be found. Though it may be a long time before it's realized. God never forgets. And when we give up our self-centered ways, when we become others-centered, then we're placing ourselves in a position, literally, for God to bless us. Solomon simply states that anything of value that is given in the right motives will be returned in value in the future. And though there is little we can know about the future, we can find hope in the Lord's promises. And this is a promise. It is a promise. Luke chapter 6, verse 36, Jesus says, give, and it shall be given to you. We're not to give in order to receive, but if we give, we will receive both physical and spiritual blessings. Billy Graham once says, God has given us two hands, one to receive with and the other to give with. We're not cisterns made for hoarding. We're channels made for sharing. And so a person that is often thought of is usually the person who often thinks of others. A person who is known for their generosity is usually treated generously by others. A person who is given to is usually a person who is always giving. A person that can easily claim favors is usually a person who has a habit of granting them, you see. It may not be immediate. It might come back, as Solomon said, after many days, or after you've long forgot about it, But giving does have its returns. Lucia May Alcott said this, cast your bread upon the waters, and after many days, it will come back buttered. So I think she got it. So, this giving is to be selfless, okay? Here's the second thing. Our giving should be liberal. It should be generous. A husband on a business trip decided to purchase a gift to take home for his wife, and so he was looking at a nice bottle of perfume and asked the lady clerk there how much it cost. She said, well, that cost $75. And immediately he responded, $75? For that little bottle? He complained. And then he says to the clerk, she said, you have something that's cheap? And she said, sure. And she gave him a mirror. If he wanted to see something that's cheap. So here in this verse, Solomon tells us how we should give. Okay? Notice he says in verse 2. Now look at this. This is so good. Give a portion to 7. And also to 8. So Solomon speaks of giving liberally. We've sort of talked about that. But this giving of a portion, it refers to the practice of distributing food as at a meal. And by using the number 7, the 7 means complete, full. So Solomon is describing a feast. He's a lavish, Brother Alanese certainly knows how to put on a feed. That's what we're talking about. Put on a feed. Well, you know, if you've ever been to Alan's, there's plenty of food. Well, a host of a feast gives lavishly, gives liberally, and that's what is expected of a host, especially at a feast. Another way of understanding this phrase, give a portion to seven, is to distribute the food liberally to all who are seated at the table. Of course, Solomon's referring to generosity in general and not specifically referring to food. However, it's reasonable that the ancients sought to meet one another's needs. The greatest need, oftentimes, at those was food. You know? So it's a good medium for talking about giving when it's talking about feeding someone. And then by adding the phrase, and also to 8, Solomon is extending the act of giving beyond what is expected. So the preacher says, when you have given to 7, well, then give to 8. And this is a good formula for giving. Give all you feel you can give. And then give a little more. Give the tithe, I could say. Give the offering above the tithe. And then give sacrificially. Those are different levels of giving in the New Testament, and all of them are specified, are there. Jesus used this same formula regarding forgiveness. You remember Peter? Peter thought 7 was enough, right? He said, well, 7 times. Forgive 7 times. You know what Jesus' response was? Well, yeah, and to 8. You know? He thought 7 was more than enough. And Jesus says 70 times 7 was his responsibility. So no one can outgive God. James 1:5 says, if any man lack wisdom, let him ask of God. He gives how? All men liberally. To 7 and to 8. I mean, beyond what is expected. And abradeth not, and it shall be given him. So when we are not living until we're giving. And if you want to live more, gush, be a floodlight. Give more. And verse 2 concludes, for thou knowest not what evil might be upon the earth. Now, we're in the COVID-19. This was something none of us even anticipated. We've not been able to assemble, you know. But don't you think God knew that? Well, at the first of this year, I was scratching my head. We never had a year like the first couple of months of this year. And if you were here for the journey, you know it. And that is, we've never had so many missionaries come by. It seemed like in those 2 months, we had missionary. And at the time, I didn't understand it. I just felt like God was in it. And now I'm looking back at it, I'm thinking, wow, Lord, you know, you just knew where we would be down the road, and you just ran a bunch of them right through here, and we didn't turn one away. That is great, you know. And so you don't know what evil might be on the morrow. I mean, no one knows what the future holds. Solomon advises people to give up their self-centered ways, to give generously, you see, to one another, because it's quite possible that in the future calamity might strike, and the one who was generous could find themselves in need. Huh? So instead of living miserly in fear and hoarding, he says, no. Live generously by faith against the unknown future. So, you know, this is, again, it's counterintuitive. Well, I can't give because I don't know what's going to be in the future. And Jesus and God says, and that's the point. And that's the point. You're making an investment. You're loaning to God. I mean, you give now because you don't know the future. It's in times of trouble and great need that God can use others to demonstrate their generosity as they receive the blessing of giving to the one who was once so gracious to them. Think about that. And this being true, we should make as many friends as we can, because we never know when we might find ourselves on the receiving end of life. You see, giving in faith is the best way to face the unknown. That's what he's saying. Faith giving always returns. Proverbs 19:17 is basically a promise to claim. It says that if you help the poor, you are actually lending to the Lord, and He will repay. And he says this. Let me read it. Proverbs 19:17. He, the Lord, hath pity upon the poor. He that hath pity on the poor lendeth to the Lord, and that which He hath given will He, the Lord, pay him again. Wow. So there you go. That's a promise when it comes to giving generously in an unknown future. Paul felt the same way and talked the same way about giving in 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 6. He says, but this I say, he which sows sparingly shall what? Reap sparingly. Reap also sparingly. He which soweth bountifully shall reap also bountifully. Let me just tell you something. We've had our missions report. This church has had a long history. Due to the credit of our former pastor for 30 some odd years, we just trained us, and we're still in that mode. I think God blesses this church. I think God is meeting our need in every way right now, because we have not stopped giving to missions. I know that God blesses the church that does that. And I don't take it lightly. Give all you can, and then give some more. Give to 7, and then give to 8. And that's the model of giving that Solomon considers being wise. It will make a positive difference in our lives. Oh, by the way, in our home, in our church, and in our culture. Third, our giving should be spontaneous. Spontaneous. I mean, man's ability to reason is a blessing, but it's also a curse. I mean, our giving should be spontaneous. Why? I'll tell you why. If we delay and think about it a while, delay giving, we'll find a reason not to give. What do you think? We'll suppress the spirit of generosity. Some of the best giving. And by the way, let's stop a minute. I believe the Holy Spirit directs all of our lives. And I think God, the Holy Spirit, speaks to us many times and prompts us to give a witness or do this or that. We grieve the Spirit. Come on. He prompts us. And it's not based on logic. It's not based on what we, an uncertain. No, it's just, and we can suppress it. The best obedience is instant obedience, right? Ecclesiastes 11, verse 3, it says, no, if the clouds be full of rain, they empty themselves upon the earth. And if a tree fall toward the south or toward the north, in the place where the tree falleth, there it shall be. So Solomon says, look to the clouds. You want a good example of giving? Look at the clouds. They load up with the moisture, and then they empty themselves. And by the way, upon the just and the unjust alike. That's the common grace of God. And so when the Lord loads us up with blessings, we must naturally and spontaneously shower them. You see? Not the cistern to hold on to it. No. The channel for it to flow through, like that garden hose, right? Flow through upon others. This is the God-given order of things. The Lord in His providence places us, I believe this, and I know you do. He places us in areas, positions of need, just like a tree falls in a given direction. The providence of God places us to give ministry, to give of ourselves, to give a word of encouragement. We don't Sunday night with our young people, or wherever, you see. He places us in a position to spontaneously shower our blessings upon others. This is just the way it is, okay? in any given direction. So when the tree falls, what does it say? There it shall be. When the tree falls, there it shall be. So when God blesses you, then just you begin to look for opportunities. If God is blessing you, it's to share those blessings with others. The hand of God is never upon us to place us in positions, is ever upon us to place us in positions to serve and to give. So, 1 Corinthians chapter 12, the local church is called asoma. It's the Greek word for the physical body. There are many members, some that are seen, he said, and some that are hidden. Right? Some that are up front, you've got your face, your mask here, you've got your ears, and some of those are prominent, and some of you have a prominent nose. I mean, some and others are more discreet. And yet, they all have a function and a purpose. I believe that God sets every member in a church to serve and to minister. And no matter what your age or what your resources, there's something you can do and something you can give. And when God blesses you, begin to look for opportunities. Why? God, it's His hand. You see, what a contrast this is with the rich man. You know that parable in Luke chapter 12, verses 16 through 20. God blessed that rich man with a bumper crop. Not just a good crop, but a bumper crop. I mean, instead of being a rain cloud, right, and showering His blessings upon others, you know what he did? He built bigger barns. He hoarded it all for himself. His automatic wasn't, God blessed me, so I must look around because somebody else needs this. No. He hoarded it. You know what God called that man? He called him a fool. He called him a fool. Verse 4 continues, He that observeth the wind shall not sow. He that regardeth the cloud shall not reap. And so as Solomon observes the culture around him, he finds that people came up with all types of excuses, all sorts of rationalizations to defend their decision to remain self-centered and devoid of generosity. He likens their behavior to a farmer who refuses to sow in the ground because the conditions are not suitable to him. And by establishing a flexible definition of suitable and non-suitable conditions, we can all establish a mindset where we will never give and we will never invest. There's always going to be a reason not to give. Verse 5, As thou knowest not which way of the Spirit, which is the way of the Spirit, nor how the bones do grow in the womb of her that is with child, even so thou knowest not the works of God who maketh, notice, all. See, like the farmer who waits on just totally favorable conditions, the individual that insists on certainties will never do anything and never give anything. We have no commandment here to qualify the recipient or to be sure that of the outcome before we give. Too often we reason out why we should not give, and in doing so we cheat ourselves of a blessing. If there is no sowing, there can be no reaping. And we reap in proportion to our sowing. Some say, well, I gave to this individual or that cause and it didn't work out. I'm not sure I'll ever give again. Now, you better be careful. Because when you cease to give to the cause of Christ, you choke off the very source of God's blessings. It's not to say that you shouldn't do away with wisdom or discernment in your giving, but there should remain in you this generous, spontaneous heart to give. And to do this, you must trust the Lord for the unknown. You must claim His promise. Even with advanced tools and knowledge in meteorology and medicine, There's much about the weather, and there's much about the womb, and we learn about viruses that remains a mystery. Okay? And if you give to someone and your gift is abused, I just want you to know that God's going to take care of both the gift and the giver. All right? The duty is to give. That's ours. And the result, well, that's up to God. And I've all been there. Someone says, well, you gave that, but look what happened. Well, all I can say is, God knows. And just keep right on moving, you see. So about our giving should be spontaneous. Here's the fourth and last thing. Our giving should be continuous. As long as we're on this earth, there will be one continuous cycle of giving and receiving, and giving and receiving. Notice verse 6 of Ecclesiastes 11. In the morning, sow thy seed. And then in the evening, withhold not thine hand, for thou knowest not whether shall prosper, either this or that, or whether they both shall be alike good. See, so the preacher urges us just to be diligent in giving and receiving. I mean, as opportunities present themselves, give so that you may be a part of God's plan. When we go to John chapter 4, it comes to my mind, it's not here, but he says, sometimes we sow without reaping. And sometimes we reap without sowing. But don't worry about it. Just get involved in it, Just keep sowing the seed of the gospel. And, a lot of times you won't reap, but, you never know. Well, I gave to that guy and he wasted that money. Yeah, but, it'll be 3 years from now. He may look back on that and God smite his heart and change him. I mean, you just don't. We can't know, can we? No. So we just got to get in the game. Can't check out. I've had a bad experience. Well, we've all had bad experiences with food, but we still eat. There's a Whataburger down here, and it's a good one. I've eaten there, but my wife and I have eaten there and had food poisoning one time. Well, we didn't eat there for a while, but it is Whataburger. So eventually we came back. We got our hearts right with God. We don't stop eating just because you had a bad experience. All things, come on. Commit the rest to God. Only God knows what the end result of one simple gesture of kindness may be. And I've discovered in life that, it's the little things that we do for others. I dare say that we forget about, that are often remembered by others. Now, you've all been there, right? You see someone you've known, or they brought up something that you did, and it was ever so small, and you've forgotten it. And that's just the way it is. It's just constantly giving and receiving, and it's the only way to live. Verses 7 and 8. Truly the light is sweet and a pleasant thing it is for the eyes to behold the sun. But if a man live many years and rejoice in them all, yet let him remember the days of darkness, for they shall be many. All that cometh is vanity. So, okay, the idea of light expressed here in Ecclesiastes 11:7 can be understood as a metaphor for life. We have that up here. In him was life, and the life was the light. Okay, so life and light. And the opposite would be darkness, which is often understood and represented as death. Right? So basically these verses are saying this. You should enjoy every day of your life, no matter how long you live. But remember that you will die, and you will be dead much longer than you were alive. And after you're dead, you cannot do anything. You can't do, I understand we'll be with heaven, but, there's things you can't do in heaven that you can only do here. You understand? It'll take away the opportunity there. So while we have it in our hand to do it, well, God has blessed us. We must give while we can, because the day is coming when we can. It's good to see the light of a new day, especially when you consider the alternative. So, Solomon is once again saying, and I conclude, enjoy life. Enjoy giving and receiving while you still have the light of day. While you still have opportunity. Give. And it doesn't matter different. It makes a bit of difference how old you are. I mean, for the young or the old and everybody in between. The darkness of death ends opportunities to contribute to the lives of others. Do others think of you as a giving person? That's a good question to ask yourself right now. Do you share the bread of life with others? Have you met the gracious, generous God who gave His Son for you? He lavished His love upon you. God so loved the world, right? That He gave. Do you have open hands and hearts for God and others? You know, some simple. These are COVID-19 days. They're bright with opportunity. They're loaded with opportunity. And in context of the present atmosphere, the smallest thing can really shine a bright light. Let's all be encouraged. Be encouraged to give. Be encouraged to be floodlights every day. God bless you.